be all and end all. All 4 ask tasks are due on the 30th of April. Okay. So I've had to bring the due date forward a week. That's because the PAS changed and the marks have to be uploaded a week earlier. So unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. I am sorry. I hope it's not too much of an inconvenience for you guys, but that is the final decision on the ask task. These will be no more changes. All 4 have to be handed in on the 30th. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about ask tasks? Yes, Elsabe.
Hi, Amy. Nice to see you again. The ICE tasks, if you could just maybe run through the topics for each, just like mention the names of each, and then any advice or tips of where we can find it in what module, you know?
Okay.
Thanks.
So, okay. So first of all, you find them over here under ask tasks. So let me just put this into you as a student. Okay, so ask task 1, I think most of you have finished. It was the referencing quiz. Ask task 2, I think most of you have handed in. So with this one, this is the multimodal worksheet. Okay, so it needs to be some sort of worksheet, but it needs to use different modes. Okay, the most likely modes are going to be writing and visual. So it's for grade 10s. It's to assess the learner's reading and writing skills, must include at least 2 models and must be creative and interesting. So with this one, there's a lot of leeway for your own creativity. First of all, it's for grade 10s and it's reading and writing skills. So that's what it's assessing. So that's going to give you a clue as to at least one of the modes that you're going to use. Be creative and interesting. That just means it has to be something that it would be interesting to see, that it's something that the kids would be excited to do. They wouldn't just look at it and groan. Okay. Ask task 3. Okay, are you seeing the PDF? Or is it still on? Okay. So with this is Thug Notes. Quite a few of you will have noticed or know Thug Notes. You will have seen them. So this is a short opinion piece on the usefulness and suitability. So do you think it is presented in a manner that your learners will understand and appreciate? Why do you say that? Can this type of pedagogy risk being alienating to some learners? Okay, why do you say yes or why do you say no? Which aspects of Vygotsky's social learning theory apply to this approach and why? And what sort of considerations would you as an educator make when using this as a tool in the classroom? Okay, so Thug Notes, as I'm sure you all know, it's all about, he's actually does have his PhD, but he presents the basic plot and themes of important literature in a very, very casual way. Okay, so this is a certain type of pedagogy. If you'll go through the notes, you'll remember which one it was. Okay. And then as task 4, let's download. Apologies, my computer does not want to work today. Okay, let's do it this way. My apologies, my computer is apparently very old and very slow. Okay, so just go to is your this is assessing your ability to design a formal assessment. So it's for grade 11, and you have to design a test or some sort of assessment, formal assessment, which means it's 4 marks. This is the advert. So you are assessing their visual literacy, so the ability to view an advert in its entirety. So you have to make sure that you ask questions that are suitable for a grade 11 class, that you scaffold the questions. Now, do you guys all know what scaffolding is? Okay, anyone? Anyone heard of scaffolding? Okay, so scaffolding is very important. What it means is that, yes, you design questions that flow, starting with easier questions and moving on to more complex. Okay, so in assessments, when you scaffold, you start off with the easier questions and then you move on to the higher order questions. When you're teaching, you scaffold by starting with providing your students with a lot of support and a lot of guidance. And then as they grasp the concepts, you slowly start to withdraw the support and withdraw your assistance, and you allow them to do it on their own. Okay, So it's like building a scaffold for them. You have to think about the mark allocation. So with that, you have to think about how many marks are you going to be allocating to each question? How much is each question worth? Could an example be starting with basic recall and moving up towards analysis and evaluation? Absolutely. Yes, you can. That's what we mean. With grade 11, you're probably not going to start with recall. You're going to probably start with the next level up. And then you'll have, so with grade 10s, you'll have more lower order questions. With grade 11s, you'll have more higher order questions. And then you will include a marking memo. Okay. Any other questions about the ICE tasks?
Thanks, Amy. I just wanted to ask, which particular learning unit will give us sort of advice on the rubric that we've got to put, especially for this ICE task 4, which is the formal test we must put together. Is there anywhere we can look for examples or advice?
So you can look at, so this will be in learning unit 4. You can look at CAPS does, the government website does have past papers that is for generally for matric, but you can just work your way slightly down a level, and that'll give you a good idea of the sort of questions you'll be asking. You'll just be asking slightly less complicated questions, or the mark allocation will be higher.
And just one last question. I
Yes.
see this kind of question related to, very often in a test, there'll be, a section on visual literacy. And
Yes.
then the memo will have answers, and there's not usually a rubric from what I can remember, but I might be wrong. Is that, am I missing something about how we're supposed to ask about the advert?
So you won't use a rubric. Sorry, I hope I understood your question correctly. You won't use a rubric for this at all. You will just use a marking memo, which is, I don't like to call it a model answer because some questions might be a bit open. So it's a suggested answers. Some questions are very straightforward, so you'll write down the answer to them. Other questions are more open-ended, in which case you will write down what points the learners must have, what points they can have, and you will give a suggested answer. So you'll write out the answer, but you'll give some guidance to the examiner about what sort of things you're looking for. Because, and then you'll add a thing, markers must use their discretion. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, that's perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay, perfect. Oh, yes. So extra references, the platinum textbook activities, search for them online from a high school. It is surprising how many high schools publish them. Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. Okay. Any other questions about the ICE tasks? Sorry, can you please give an example of a lower order and a higher order question for grade 11? So a lower order question would be something like, Just give me a moment. So lower order would be explain why certain words in the body text are in bold. Okay, because that's very simple. It's just for emphasis. Or another lower order question would be explain the logo at the bottom of the page. A higher order question would be evaluate the extent to which the image enhances the body text. So for this, sorry, let me just, a lower order question wouldn't really be wouldn't be identifying part of speech in this, because this is assessing visual literacy. That would be more for language. Okay, but for a language assessment, that would be a question. So identify the part of speech. The higher order would be analyzing the effectiveness of that word or the connotation of that word. Lana, I can't see my, oh, sorry. Can't see my similarity reports. Do the ISTARs have similarity reports? Does anyone know? I'm not sure if they do have similarity reports. Okay. So yeah, no, they don't have, so you don't have to worry about that. Yes, Sage.
Hi, Amy. I hope you're well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I know that you said that when we assess, like, for example, like visual literacy, then we should focus on visual literacy. But in the CAPS document, it says that for teaching purposes, we should always incorporate language structures and conventions in reading and writing, listening and viewing, etc. So when it comes to assessment, then do we assess it separately? Because I know that we're supposed to teach it in an integrated manner, but then we don't assess it in an integrated manner. So I just wanted to check that.
So with that, it does depend on different school policies, but by and large, if you look at the NSC, the NSC exams, each section is divided in, each question is one particular section. So you have your comprehension, then you have your summary, then you have your visual literacy, then you have your cartoons, and then you have your language. So by and large, most assessments might include one question on language, but we teach it in an integrated way, but we generally we only assess one area. So we're not necessarily going to tell them to study visual literacy and language. They're just going to study for visual literacy. The way it's integrated in the paper is language is assessed through a passage. So the learners are given a passage and then they are asked questions based on that passage. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Anything else? Okay, great. So I just want to go over a bit of feedback from the assignment. Guys, I want to remind you that this is a postgraduate assignment. So if you got over 70, well done. That's very good. So I'm just going to go through each question and give you some general feedback. Okay, is anyone else having problems opening their feedback? Okay, well, let me make another note. Okay. I will see what I can do about that from my end. Okay. Elsa B, yes, you've got a question.
Sorry, I just can't access the chat for some reason. So I'm also not able to see my the rubric marking for my assignment. I could see the mark, but I couldn't see the rubric. I think a few people had that issue. So if you can add my name to the list.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will see what I can do. Okay, so it seems that they are popping up. It might just be that the system is slow, but I will try again. Okay, so some general feedback. Question 1 was the email to the science department. Now, the biggest bit of feedback I want to give you here is to focus on the most essential parts of the question. Now, this was designed to see if you can write an email that sounds like an email, and if you can provide information in context. So two of the biggest fallbacks here were a lot of you wrote in, I want to say, too academic style. This was an email. Okay, it had in-text referencing and everything, but it still needed to read like an email that you would send to a colleague. So the tone would have been business casual rather than formal. The next big thing is most of you spoke about the CAPS document, you spoke about the core English skills, you mentioned the importance of English for academic success. But the big problem came in that you didn't link that information to the scenario. So you said what the CAPS document said, you said what the core skills are, you mentioned that it was important for academic success, but you didn't really explain why science should care about that. So you needed to link the core English skills of reading, for example, to the fact that they're going to need to read science textbooks, they're going to need to read the questions and answers. What is it that these skills bring to the table? And that also covers the importance of English for academic success. So you just want to make sure that you aren't just looking at the bullet points, you're looking at the question as a whole. Also, please, you must be careful of the word count. Okay, with question 2, once again, it comes down to reading the question quite carefully. In a structured and academically sound paragraph, explain the importance of acknowledging diversity in the classroom. So quite a few of you fell down a bit was, why do we actually acknowledge it? Not what it is or why we have diversity in the classroom. Why do we need to acknowledge it? So things like you need to, by acknowledging diversity in the classroom. You are creating a safe space for all the learners. By acknowledging diversity, you are able to present lessons that accommodate different learner needs. That's what we were looking for. Okay. Question 3.1. Once again, you need to read the question carefully. It's a literature approach. So it couldn't be the communicative or the text-based. Those are language approaches. It had to be one of the literature approaches. So you had to explain the approach. Some of you needed to add in a bit more of the explanation. Most of you did quite well with the providing examples. Okay, that was quite well done. With 3.2, now this one is with this, it's very difficult to get 5 or 6 because that really is the top end of this is a really fantastic resource. So if you got 4, you did well there. Okay, the biggest fall down I found was people weren't focusing on the method that they had chosen. So the literature method, you included all of the different teaching methods in your resource. But by and large, that was nicely done. Okay, question 4 was the essay. I'm going to be honest, you might not believe it, but I did mark this quite generously. The biggest problem was the essays were quite muddled. So they were a bit here, there, and all over the show. There was a lot of repetition. So you really do need to plan these essays out. So you want to make sure that you choose how you are going to discuss each point. So are you going to explain the communicative approach, explain the benefits, and provide practical examples of lessons that you would use, and then move on to the text-based approach and discuss the advantages of that, and then provide practical examples? Or are you going to explain the communicative approach and then explain the text-based approach, then explain the advantages of the communicative and then the advantages of the text-based? Couple of things. Please do not use headings. Okay, you can use headings in your draft, but not in an essay. Okay, so no headings for an essay. No subheadings for assignment 2. It's nice in terms of signposting for yourself, but you have to take them out by the final draft. The other thing is each paragraph needs to lead into the next one. So I shouldn't get halfway through, I shouldn't read a paragraph and get halfway through the next paragraph and go, oh, wait, now we're talking about this. So I shouldn't be confused when I move between paragraphs. Like, oh, what are we talking about now? Okay, so there needs to be a logical link. The other thing was there was a lot of repetition in explaining the approach and then the advantages. A lot of you listed the advantages in your explanation and then ran over the advantages again. Okay, so you want to be very careful with that. Don't over, or for 1 or 2 of you, under reference. So you do not need to reference every single line. You shouldn't be referencing every line. You should be referencing 2 to 3 times a paragraph, and that's it, because you need to add your own understanding and your own arguments. Okay, so those are the big things. Make sure you've planned it. Make sure that you have structured it, and then please edit it. Okay. So, any questions on the feedback? Yes, Sage.
Hi, Amy. I just wanted to ask a question about the headings, because there seems to be like conflicting opinions about that depending on which course you're doing. Because in Foundations of Education, for example, we were told that headings are like imperative, like they are compulsory. So I'm not sure, is it like a course by course basis? Because obviously this was our first assignment, so we didn't know.
Unfortunately, it is a course by course basis. Okay, I didn't for this one, I didn't really penalize you for using headings, because I know in some courses they do like them, and I know you're all coming from different undergrad degrees where they expect different things from you. But for this course, because it's an English course, we don't use headings. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So for assignment 2, please watch the NSS, or the Academic Support System, Academic Support Session. It is on the YouTube playlist. I know it's long, but you can break it down into little bits, just to double check that you are on the right track there. Okay. Now, okay, this is for all of you. You can answer on the whiteboard, or you can answer in the chat, or you can put your hands up. Elspie, you've got your hand up?
Sorry, I can't actually see anything. Have you shared something?
We're on the whiteboard. Can everyone else see the whiteboard? Okay.
I'm not sure why. I haven't something odd going on my side. Maybe someone can take a screenshot of it later and put it on our group, just so I can see what was. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm doing something wrong technically.
It might be your Teams. I don't know if exiting and entering will help again, but if
Okay,
someone
I'll
would
try
mind,
that.
please taking a screenshot. Okay. Excellent job, everyone. So to give an outline of what is to come, to provide the context and steps to be taken for the learners, to activate prior knowledge, to introduce learners to the topic of the lesson, to get learners ready for learning. Instruction should involve a hook that catches the learner's attention and make them want to learn. Yes. To explain what is about to be discussed and to provide the students with guidance throughout the essay. To activate prior knowledge and prepare the learners for the learning that's to take place. Yes, to provide guidance, to establish context, engage the student, outline the essays. Okay. To establish context and to engage the learners. That's for essays. But yes, sorry, what is the purpose of an introduction to a lesson? But that is an excellent answer for the purpose to an essay, the introduction to an essay. Okay. So to provide prior knowledge before starting the session, so the students have something to build off. Yes, to introduce a concept, to inform the reader what the text will be about, to capture attention, to give prior knowledge. Yes. So you've nailed it. That is what an introduction is for, to activate prior knowledge, to set up the lesson, to provide an outline of what will be coming, to provide the learning outcomes, and to hook the learners. So if you nail the introduction, you really nailed the lesson. Okay. I mean, you can always lose it later, but you want to get that introduction right. So you've got a short amount of time in which to grab their attention. So you want to do something that's going to interest them. However, you don't just want to do anything. What you want to do is you want to do something that's engaging, something that's interesting to them. But you want to make sure that it is relevant to the lesson, because it's no good grabbing their attention and then changing completely to another topic because they won't know what's going on. So the trick is to find something that is going to grab them, but also activate their prior knowledge and introduce them to what is to come. Okay. Also, as we discussed, good time to provide an introduction and to greet the learners and to set up for the lesson. So if there's anything that they need to understand, then they can do it in that section. Okay, any questions? Okay, right. What is the teaching and learning phase of the lesson? Okay, Samantha, I see your comment. Can you send me an email about that? Okay, some excellent answers here. To actively engage with content and allow learners to practice, the phase of the lesson where active learning takes place. Teaching and learning is when the information and learning objectives are taught to the students. This can be done in many different ways. My personal favorite is cooperative learning, simply because it allows students to engage cooperatively. Introducing a concept, allowing students to explore it through activities and then explaining and applying what they've learned. Engage, explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. The main part or body of the lesson, here you teach learners a new topic or revise a topic that was previously covered. This phase is between the introduction and the conclusion. The period of the lesson devoted to content teaching and conceptualization for the understanding and then assessment. Introduces and explains new concepts or skills based on the lesson objectives. Yes, excellent answers. You guys have nailed it. So what is the teaching and learning phase? It does exactly what it says on the tin. This is where you teach and they learn. Now, you've explained this really well. During this time is when active learning takes place, as someone has mentioned. So this is where all the theory we've been learning about comes together. So you've learned about Vygotsky's theory, you've learned about the various teaching approaches, you've learned about multimodality. This is where you apply them all. Yes, you apply them, you might use multimodality and etc. in the introduction, but during the teaching and learning phase, this is where you introduce the concepts. You'll introduce the basic outline in the introduction, but you will explore and explain the concepts with them, and you will allow them to actively engage with the concepts. So things like someone mentioned cooperative learning, activities, worksheets, anything that gets them to engage and to prepare them for the assessment. Okay, well done. Okay, you can guess what this one is. What happens in the closure phase of a lesson? Okay, so once again, some excellent points. To conclude the lesson and ensure that the objectives of the lesson have been reached, to receive feedback from the students from the lesson. Yes, the lesson is concluded or wrapped up. The teacher can facilitate class discussions during this phase to summarize the key points from the lesson and encourage reflection. Very nice. Teacher aims to wrap up the learning experience and facilitate student reflection on what they've learned, ensuring meaningful and lasting impression based on the topic. Very nice. Review points, check understanding, address any confusion, and give learners a chance to reflect. Nice. Closure phase acts as a summary of what is learned, kind of rounding it all up. Between introduction and teaching and learning phase, this normally followed by some activity to ensure learning was effective. This can be used for linking the next lesson, reflective exit surveys. Okay, very nice. Once again, you all seem to have understood the concept very well. So the closure phase is exactly as you've explained. This is where everything wraps up. So we've mentioned before that the students are going to remember the very last thing that you taught them. So what you do is you need to take some time at the end of the lesson to reinforce and to remind the students what the main learning objectives were and how you have covered them. So the learners remember what it is that they were meant to be learning and how they learned it. You can also use this time to get feedback from them. Okay, so you want them to reflect on what they've learned. You also want to get some sort of feedback if they have understood the main objectives, if they have understood the lesson in the way you need them to understand it. So for this part, you can do it in many different ways, but you want to use it as a time to really reinforce the main points. You can also, after this, have some sort of activity for them, so a homework activity or an exit survey, something that gives you feedback on how well they have understood it. Also, as someone mentioned, you can use this to set up for the next lesson. So especially if there's going to be some sort of continuation, you can also include in here how and what they need to think about for the next lesson. Okay. Any questions about any of the phases? Okay, great, Samantha.
Amy,
Yes.
maybe you know, or maybe the others know, is there any sort of research or trial and error assessment of what is the ideal length of a lesson? Because, for instance, last year I was at a school where the classes were 45 minutes each. And I found it quite difficult to thoroughly do all three phases in 45 minutes, especially because I didn't, the teachers moved around to the classes, the students were stationary, and the teachers moved around. So you lose a bit of time in moving around to a different class. What is your assessment of the length of time that is needed to do those three things thoroughly?
That is actually an excellent question. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% sure what the research says. In general, students have, or humans actually have a very short attention span. So a lesson that is too long is going to be very difficult to maintain. But you are correct, it is not easy to fit all three stages into a lesson. So this is where lesson planning really comes to the fore. And it's very important to have a lesson plan. And you also need to be flexible with it because you might find some parts of the lesson take longer than expected. So the introduction, you want to keep 5 to 10 minutes at most because you want to hook them, but what you would ideally do is use that hook that interests them and then have that also act as the guideline or the lesson objectives. So you don't want it more than that. The teaching and learning phase, you do have to measure out quite carefully because sometimes you're going to need to explain more, and other times you're going to be able to do just a little bit of explanation before you provide them with an activity to do. It's almost impossible to get the timing of a lesson exactly right. Teachers who've been teaching for 20, 30 years still can struggle with that. So it's definitely not an easy thing. What is very important is that you keep an eye on your time. So you see when the bell is going to go and you actually stop the teaching and learning to make sure you have enough time to do the closure phase. So you might have to then in the next lesson continue with finishing up this lesson before moving on. So it's a bit more art than science. Yeah, some schools only have 30 minutes. I find that very short, in which case you have to shorten your introduction and shorten your closure phase even more. But yes, once in a cycle, you have a double period. So that's the period when you can really get into a very meaty topic. I hope that helps a bit.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Right. So I think we're going to leave it there. We've got 2 minutes to go. Tomorrow we are going to be looking at assessments. Okay. Formal, informal, summative, and formative. Does anyone have any questions whatsoever? I'll just check about the link. I'll put up the link for tomorrow's lesson up on the announcements as well. Okay, if you don't have any questions, then thank you very much for joining. You guys did a great job this evening. So thank you and have a great evening. If you have an assignment question, can we ask tomorrow? Yes. Okay, Jessica, that's not a problem.